It started with a smell, not the sour kind of alleyways, or the cold staleness of rain on cardboard, but something warm. Soap, lavender, maybe vanilla, something that didn't belong on the streets. And yet, there it was, drifting past him as he sat hunched by the sliding doors, shoulders cloaked in a coat too big for even his regrets to fill. His name was Henry. At least, it used to be. Before the years blurred, before the beard came in white and wild, before his hands trembled not from cold, but from memory. People passed him every day, some with pity, most with avoidance. He'd stopped keeping track. Names, faces, days of the week, all of it vanished into the slow hum of survival. But that morning, everything changed. All because of a necklace. A locket, to be exact. She hadn't noticed him at first. Nurses never did, not unless he collapsed or bled or cried loud enough to disturb the peace. But she had that smell, that warmth. She walked fast, but her presence lingered. He saw her wrist first, reaching down to tie her shoe near the door. A nurse's badge clipped to her top. Her hair was up, messy, tired, but elegant. And then, as she stood, the sunlight caught it, a silver locket that hung just above her heart. It swung like a pendulum, hypnotic. Henry squinted. He knew that shape, that tiny heart, slightly scratched near the edge. He could feel his own heart halt, caught somewhere between disbelief and memory. She moved on through the hospital doors and into her day. But Henry didn't move. Couldn't, because 32 years ago, he'd given that locket to a little girl, his daughter. He hadn't seen her since. He didn't stand up. He couldn't. His knees felt like sandbags, his chest hollowed out by some unseen quake. The world around him spun in slow motion, cars passing, intercom crackling, heels clicking across pavement, but all he saw was that locket, swinging like it used to, back when her tiny hands clutched it every night before bed, whispering, "Good night, Daddy." The memory struck like thunder. A vision, her 5 years old, wrapped in purple pajamas, curled beside a ragged teddy bear. The locket had been too big for her, but she wore it with pride. Called it her forever necklace. And then the night it all fell apart, the night he didn't come home. Not because he didn't want to, but because life, in all its cruelty, cracked the floor beneath him. One bad decision, one drink too many, one lost job, and the spiral began. He'd tried. God knows, he'd tried. But the world doesn't stop spinning just because a man falls off. And by the time he looked up, his family was gone. They moved, changed numbers, no forwarding address, no closure, just absence. He'd searched, once, checked shelters, called old friends, even sat in waiting rooms pretending to need prescriptions, just to peek at patient lists. But life has a way of teaching you when to stop hoping. Until now, that locket. That exact, scratched, heart-shaped locket. There was no mistake. Henry's hands trembled as he pushed himself up from the curb. His knees screamed, joints stiff from nights spent curled on concrete. But he didn't care. He hobbled to the entrance, past the glass doors that hissed open, automatically. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The world smelled sterile, sharp, alive in a way that reminded him how long he'd been outside the loop of it. A young receptionist noticed him, half standing with a clipboard. Sir, I'm sorry, you can't, I need to speak to a nurse. He rasped, voice like sandpaper. I can get someone from security. No, he croaked, pointing weakly down the corridor. She had a silver heart, a locket, please. The receptionist hesitated, something in his eyes, desperation, maybe pain too raw to fake. Gave her pause. She glanced at a nearby nurse, wheeling a supply cart. Emily, she called. Did Alyssa just go back on shift? Yeah, the nurse nodded, frowning. She went to 3C. Tell her, someone needs to see her, someone outside. Henry sat back down in a waiting chair, breath shallow. What would he say? I gave you that necklace when you were 5. I ruined everything, and now I'm here, a ghost in rags. But before he could make sense of the ache, she appeared, and he saw her clearly this time. She walked toward him slowly, her brow furrowed in that half-polite, half-wary way healthcare workers wear, like armor, kind but cautious. Her hair was pulled tighter now, clipboard in one hand, and that same locket swayed with every step. Silver scratched, still shining. Hi, she said carefully. They told me someone was asking for me. Henry opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His tongue felt heavy, like it didn't belong in his mouth anymore. His eyes, sunken, rimmed red from years of wind and insomnia, locked onto hers, and then he saw it. The eyes his ex-wife always said their daughter had. His eyes, hazel with flecks of gold that caught the light when she laughed. Alyssa's were the same, not just similar, identical, like a mirror he hadn't seen in 3 decades. His voice cracked. I know that necklace. She blinked, instinctively touching it, her fingers brushing the heart's curve. It was a gift, she said. I've had it since I was a little girl. My mother gave it to me. It was my dad's. He disappeared before I turned 6. Her voice faltered slightly. She didn't say it with anger. but with that practiced detachment of someone who'd long since made peace with the absence. A scar that no longer bled, but still ached when the weather changed. I gave it to her, Henry whispered. Alyssa blinked. What? He slowly lifted a trembling hand and mimicked the shape of the locket midair. One side had a photo. The other side, I carved something with a key before I gave it to her, something only I would know. Her face shifted, walls rising, caution flickering behind her eyes. Henry steadied his breath. Open it. She hesitated, but curiosity won. Her thumb pressed the tiny latch and the locket popped open with a soft metallic click. She looked down, then froze. On one side, a faded, black and white photo, a man in uniform, bearded, smiling with the pride of a first-time father. On the other, scratched roughly into the silver backing with the kind of clumsy hand only love excuses, were 3 crooked words. Moonlight Girl, Forever. Alyssa dropped to her knees. Her clipboard hit the floor with a thud. Unnoticed are her lips. Parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes filled fast, overflowed faster. That's what he used to call me, she whispered. Moonlight Girl, he used to say. I lit up his darkest nights. Henry's hands covered his face. His shoulders heaved. A wrecked sob, shattering the years of practiced silence. His breath stuttered like an old engine fighting to come alive. I looked for you, he said between sobs. I tried God, I tried, but life. It swallowed me whole. I lost everything. Then I lost the right to come back. Alyssa reached forward slowly, like touching a ghost. Like reaching for a dream you're afraid will vanish if you move too fast. But you're here, she whispered. He nodded, shaking. I didn't come back to take anything, he said. I saw the locket. That's all, that's enough. Just knowing you're okay. That you became someone kind. She looked at him like she was seeing something ancient and sacred, a relic of a life half remembered in bedtime stories and broken photo frames. Then, without warning, she did something no one had done in years. She hugged him hard, right there, on the waiting room floor, and Henry broke completely. Years of ache, guilt, hunger, shame they poured out of him in one long, uncontrollable wail muffled against her shoulder, and she just held him. As if by holding him, she could hold time. As if by wrapping her arms around him, she could stitch shut the gap life had torn open 3 decades before. People watched, quietly. Some wiped tears. Others turned away, the moment too intimate, too raw. But no one interrupted, because it was obvious to everyone in that hospital lobby they weren't just seeing a reunion. They were witnessing a resurrection. She didn't let go for a long time. The hug wasn't gentle. It wasn't pretty. It was messy, tangled, full of tears that soaked through fabric and gasps that stole the breath from both their lungs. But it was real, and in that moment, for the first time in decades, Henry felt seen, not as a shadow on the sidewalk, not as another statistic in the city's homeless count, but as a father, as someone who still mattered. When they finally pulled apart, both were trembling. I should get you something, Alyssa said softly, rising to her feet, but never taking her eyes off him. You look like you haven't eaten in days. Henry gave a weak laugh. Try weeks, then let me feed you. Just sit tight. She disappeared down the corridor before he could argue. Returned minutes later with 2 turkey sandwiches from the break room, 2 bottles of water, and a single chocolate pudding cup. He chuckled when she handed it to him. You remembered. Mom said you used to sneak these into my lunchbox every Friday. It was my favorite part of the week. He looked down at the pudding. His eyes swam. I didn't think anyone remembered me that way, he whispered. I do, she said. I always did. They sat in the lobby together, shoulder to shoulder, eating like it was Thanksgiving dinner. Every bite was a peace offering. Every glance, a stitch pulling something torn back together. By the time the sun set, Henry had told her pieces of the story, how he'd tried to get sober, how the system swallowed him up, how shame kept him silent for too long. She didn't judge him, not once. She listened, eyes soft but steady, and let him be fragile without punishing him for it. I never stopped wondering, she said, voice thick. I used to think maybe you died. Or maybe you just didn't want me anymore. He looked her straight in the eyes, tears brimming. There was never a day I didn't want you. I just didn't think I deserved to be your father anymore. She touched his hand. Well, she said, I'm here to tell you that you do. Next morning, she brought him fresh clothes. They didn't fit perfectly, but they were warm and clean and smelled like detergent instead of the street. She let him shower in the staff locker room before her shift began. He wept when he looked in the mirror. Who's that? He whispered, touching the unfamiliar reflection. A man who's getting a second chance. She replied gently from behind him. Later that week, Alyssa helped him apply for emergency housing. She used her badge to call in favors, leaned on social workers she trusted, and stayed late to help him fill out forms. When he said he didn't want to be a burden, she looked at him and said, You gave me life. Let me help you live it again. When the small apartment came through just a single room with a bed, a hot plate, and a door that locked, Henry stood in the middle of it for almost 5 minutes before speaking. I've been invisible for so long, he said quietly. This makes me feel human again. She put a photo of her own daughter on the dresser. Her name's Mia, she said. She's 6. She deserves to know her grandfather. He stared at the frame. She has your smile. She has your eyes, she whispered back. Henry didn't ask for much. He didn't try to reclaim a lost role or make up for time that couldn't be unspent. Instead, he focused on small things, brushing his hair before visits, folding napkins. When they ate, bringing Alyssa old poems he scribbled on the backs of junk mail. But one day, as he sat with Mia at the park watching her swing, she turned to him suddenly and asked, "Are you my grandpa for real?" He smiled. "I hope so," he said. She nodded. Solemnly, "I'm glad. You're my favorite." And just like that, the world righted itself. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough to make up for the silence. Enough to make the locket worth wearing every day. It happened one Thursday, 3 weeks after the reunion. The hospital had just wrapped its shift change. Nurses and scrubs wandered toward their cars, tired but laughing. It had rained earlier, and the sidewalk shimmered with puddled light. Henry had come to visit Alyssa, like always cleaner now. His hair neatly trimmed, a soft button-down she'd thrifted for him, pressed and tucked. He liked being early. It gave him time to sit outside on the bench across from the ER and watch the world move. He didn't flinch when sirens screamed anymore. He didn't shrink into himself when people walked by. He sat tall now. People saw him. Then the ambulance rolled in. Fast. Too fast. The doors flew open, and medics tumbled out, pulling a stretcher. A child, small limp, oxygen mask clamped to her face. Her mother, a wreck of mascara and disbelief, ran behind them. Alyssa saw it first. From the sliding doors, she snapped into motion, her stethoscope bouncing against her chest, voice sharp and steady. "Let's go. Trauma Bay 3. Call respiratory." But Henry didn't move, because when the girl was wheeled past, her necklace slipped out from her collar, a twin, the exact same silver locket. He froze. His mind raced fragments of memory. A second child, a baby too small to hold the first time he left. But no, he'd only had one daughter. One. And then he looked at the mother. Her face, and he knew. The woman, mid-30s, tear-streaked, was unmistakable. Claire, his niece, his brother's daughter, and the girl on the stretcher was his grand-niece. He stood, legs unsure beneath him, and crossed the threshold into the building. Security moved toward him instinctively, but Alyssa waved him off. "It's okay," she called, breathless. "He's family." He caught up. Just as the nurses wheeled the child into a trauma room, Claire paced frantically outside, hand over her mouth, barely holding herself together. Henry stopped a few feet away. "Claire?" he asked, voice tentative. She turned, confused, then blinked. It had been decades. He knew how different he looked, but her eyes widened. She gasped. "Uncle Henry, I didn't know," he said. "I didn't know you were here. I didn't know she was yours." Claire stared at him, broken and reeling, but before she could respond, a nurse emerged. "We need someone who can calm her down," she said quickly. "The girl Lily, she's awake but panicking. She doesn't recognize anyone in scrubs." Henry stepped forward, slowly. "Let me try," he whispered. Inside, the little girl writhed in the bed, terrified. Her fingers clawed at her foreline, tears streaking her cheeks. Machines beeped in frantic rhythm. Her oxygen mask had slipped, and the nurses hovered, unsure how to help without scaring her more. Henry entered gently. He didn't wear gloves. He didn't speak loudly. He just sat in the chair beside her and whispered, "Hey there, Moonlight Girl." The room stilled. Lily blinked up at him, trembling. "That's what my grandpa calls my mom," she whispered hoarsely. Henry smiled, eyes filling again. "That's what I called her too, a long time ago." Her breathing slowed. He took her hand gently, so gently it barely registered. "You're okay now," he said. "You're safe. And do you want to know something?" She nodded, big eyes, watching. "I think you're my second Moonlight Girl." The nurse standing beside them choked back a sob. The monitor slowed. Lily's vitals settled. She didn't pull away again, and no one knows who took out their phone and snapped a photo. Henry, old and gentle, hand in hers, his face soft, hers calm. The silver locket between them, 2 generations apart, but glowing with the same light. That photo went viral. Alyssa posted it on her private account with 6 words. "He came back." Just in time. Within a day, it had 40,000 shares. By the weekend, news crews showed up. People came with blankets, food, donations, then left them in quiet piles outside the shelter where Henry once slept. One man, a hospital director, watched the news clip and called Alyssa that night. "Does your father want a job?" he asked. "Depends," she said. "Doing what?" "Talking to patients," the director said. "Telling stories. Reminding them that they matter." Henry now spends his mornings visiting the long-term care wing. He brings coffee to nurses and reads poetry to the dying. He tells them stories not just of pain, but of second chances. He still wears the same coat Alyssa gave him that first week, but now it's stitched with a hospital volunteer badge. He doesn't live in the streets anymore. E lives in a little apartment with sunlight in the windows and a photo of Mia and Lily on the dresser. He keeps the chocolate pudding stocked in the fridge, and every night before he sleeps, he touches the locket Alyssa gave back to him, the original, his carving still inside. Then he whispers into the dark, "Thank you for waiting, Moonlight Girl," and somewhere, 2 daughters, a granddaughter, and a niece all sleep peacefully because a man the world once forgot came back just in time.